Voice in the wilderness. As far as I can recall, there has not been a more politically driven budget, nor has there been a budget so miserably failed to seize an opportunity to reform and restructure the economy. The people were ready and the government failed them. 2025 mirrored 1991. Look at the situation in 2024. The BJP had been voted to power for the first time, but not with a warning. You will have sufficient numbers, but not an absolute majority to form the government. You will not attempt to change the constitution. You will govern by consensus. You will address the issues of unemployment, poverty, inequality, inflation, farmers' distress, and absent a broken infrastructure. It was the same situation that Narasimha Rao Manmohan Singh faced in 1991. The Congress PM-FM seized the opportunity and announced path-breaking reforms beginning on July 1, 1991, and completed the first tranche of reforms by August 15, 1991. Devaluation, tax reforms, financial sector reforms, taxation reforms, and industrial policy. After the 2024 election, the first budget of Mr. Modi, Ms. Sitharaman, on July 23, 24 was a damn squib. It has nothing to address the fundamental causes. The usual excuses were trotted out, and there was a promise that the first full budget, whatever that meant, would address the issues. Meanwhile, the economy slowed down, wages were stagnant, inflation reigned, and the RBI refused to budge. FDI inflows declined, FIIs pulled out investments, and businesses and business persons migrated to Singapore, Dubai, and US. The question on everybody's lips was who will call out the government? Thankfully, the chief economic advisor was frank and forthright in his preface to the economic survey. His sensible advice of get out of the way and deregulate. There are 13 chapters in economic survey, but I shall pick only 4 to illustrate what was the CEA's recommendation and what was the government's response. Chapter 1, State of the Economy, underlined the causes of the slowdown and recommended deregulation and structural reforms at the grassroots level to improve competitiveness. The FM took the opposite route. She threw more money into current schemes and announced 7 schemes, 8 missions, and 4 funds. There was no specific proposal for deregulation, nor were any steps outlined to improve the competitiveness of any sector. She could only announce of a high-level committee for regulatory reforms to review non-financial sector regulations, implying that financial sector will remain under government's control and no review will be made. Denial, more denial. Unemployment is the gravest challenge facing the country, especially families with unemployed children. In Chapter 12, Employment and Skill Development, Economic Survey relied on PLFS that concluded that employment rate had declined to 3.2%. That would be considered full employment in economic theory. Realizing the pitfall, Economic Survey pointed out that we need to generate 78 lakh non-farm jobs every year until 2030, when the working age population will reach 96 crore. The proportion of regular salaried jobs has declined and self-employment, including in own farms, has increased. Real wage per month in salaried employment has declined from 12,665 to 11,858. In last 7 years, real wages for self-employed workers have also declined. All evidence on the ground, especially the numbers of applications for even low-level jobs, contradicts the PLFS conclusion. Does the FM agree with PLFS and economic survey? Her silence on the matter is denial of the truth. The reality is that while the GDP grows at a moderate pace, unemployment is growing, especially among youth and graduates, and job creation is at standstill. There is a whole chapter under the title Deregulation Drives Growth. With the current investment rate of 31% and a growth rate of under 6.5%, economic survey pointed out that we could not become a developed country by 2047. The Economic Survey urged the government to accelerate and amplify the deregulation agenda and work towards the towards giving to people back their agency and enhancing the economic freedom of individuals and organizations. The economic survey identified the regulatory constraints, including factory regulation and inflated regulatory capacity. I can give examples of deregulation from 91 to 96, such as abolition of the office of CCI and E and turning FERA and FEMA. Similarly, the FM could have eliminated some offices and regulations she shield away, and my guess is nothing will happen for the full year. Despite the high decibel Make in India campaign, India's manufacturing sector is tiny and not growing at a robust pace. Chapter 7 Industry All About Business Reforms brings out the cold facts. Our share of global manufacturing is 2.8% compared to 28.8% of China. The manufacturing sector's share of GVA has declined from a high of 17.4% in 2011-12 to 14.2% in 23-24. We import high-end machines required for manufacturing. On R&D, we spend less than 1% of GDP. The economic survey says manufacturing sector Manufacturing sector's share of GVA has declined from a high of 17.4 to 14.2. We import high-end machines required for manufacturing. On R&D, we spend less than 1% of GDP. The economic survey said the way forward is the paved with deregulation, R&D, and D, and innovation, and improving skill levels of the workforce. The budget's response was to launch schemes and missions. Governance is in the present. There are challenges. There is a government, but governance is absent. CEA is another voice in the wilderness. Charkhi Dadri, one of the deadliest mid-air crashes, moments before the US military Black Hawk helicopter collided with mid-air with an American Eagle bombardier jet. US military Black Hawk helicopter collided midair with an American Eagle bombardier jet over the Potomac River in Washington DC, and the air traffic controller alerted the crew of the helicopter. Seconds later, the aircraft collided, killing 67. For any air traffic controller, it's the worst nightmare, a mid-air collision, said the air traffic controller V.K. Datta in the National Geographic series Air Crash Investigation. He was referring to the mid-air collision between the Saudi Arabian Airlines Boeing 747 and a Kazakhstan Airlines Ilyushin IL-76 on November 12, 1996, Ocharki Dadri, 65 kilometers west of Delhi. Datta should know on a fateful day, he was the approach controller at the Indira Gandhi International Airport in New Delhi and was in contact with the pilot of both Boeing 7 and Illusion 76. At 6:40 p.m., the jets collided mid-air. The massive jets covered in flames plunged into the mustard fields below in two wreckage fields 7 kilometers apart. All 349 people on both aircraft were killed. In 1996, I was second year graduate student. The year before, I had lost over 150 sorties trapped inside a glider cockpit as an NCC cadet in Bhubaneswar Airport. I had not been near a commercial jet yet, leave alone step inside one. But the analog altimeter with three needles in a glider was the same as one you would find in any cockpit with analog instruments, including big jets. So I felt I had something to say on the Charkhi Dadri crash. I wrote the letter to the editor, Telegraph Kolkata, speculating not on what could have caused the crash, but all the ways in which altimeter can show erroneous readings. After all, the two jets collided as both inadvertently were at the same altitude. I would be proven wrong, of course. My letter little more than a display of my youthful impetuousness. Saudi Flight 763 was a scheduled passenger service from Delhi to Dhahran in Saudi Arabia with 312 passengers and crew on board. In the cockpit was 45-year-old Captain Khalid Al-Shubaili, First Officer Nazir Khan, and Flight Engineer Ahmed Edreis. Kazakh Flight 1907 was a chartered flight between Chimkent to Kazakhstan to Delhi. There were 37 tourists and crew on board. In the cockpit were 44-year-old Captain Alexander Cherab Panov, First Officer M. Dazau, and Flight Engineer Chup Chuprov, Navigator Arip Beo, and Radio Operator Igor Rep. Datta was the approach controller, guiding both aircraft. According to accounts, ATC transcripts and cockpit voice recorder from the two aircraft. After takeoff, Saudi Flight 763 were cleared to fly at 10,000 feet and then at 14,000 feet. Datta instructed the crew to maintain 14,000 feet and stand by for permission to climb higher. In those days at Delhi airport, for both arriving and commercial jets, there was only a single corridor. The other corridors were reserved for the military, which means Kazakhs were flying towards each other in the same air corridor from opposite directions. Delhi airport was then equipped only with a primary radar. It did not have a secondary surveillance radar. With the primary radar, controllers can only see on their screen the various aircraft present in the airspace without any information such as aircraft's identity, position, altitude, speed, etc. to the controller. Working with only a primary radar that are dependent on the pilots of Kazakh and Saudi to know their altitudes, both crew acknowledged Datta's instructions to maintain 15,000 feet and 14,000 feet. Saudi 763 will maintain 140. The Saudi crew acknowledged and there were last transmission that was their last transmission to the ATC. Kazakh 1907 now reached 150. Acknowledged the crew of the Illusion 76. Minutes later, the pilots of the US Air Force cargo flight, which was descending into Delhi, alerted Datta about collision. We saw something to our right, looks like big fireball, big explosion, pilot told Datta. The government set up a court of inquiry led by Delhi High Court Judge C.R.C. Lahoti. The investigation did not find any fault with Datta and said he had given correct instructions to both flight crew. The inquiry did not find any fault with the equipment of the altimeters either. The inquiry found that at one point when the Kazakh crew acknowledged that it was 15,000 feet, the aircraft's actual altitude was 16,000 feet. Prior to the impact, Kazakh jet has descended to 14,000 feet. As recorded in the CVR 4 seconds, the Kazakh radio operator said, saw the Saudi jet coming and shouted, "Get to 150 because 14 because on the 140th uh, that one why would such an experienced crew commit such a fatal error? Investigators found that it was radio operator of Kazakh flight who was communicating with Datta. Rep sat behind the pilots facing sideways. He did not have an altimeter in front of him to check the aircraft's altitude. He needed to glance over the shoulder of the captain or co-pilot to see the readings on their altimeters. Inside the cockpit, there was no verbal acknowledgement from the pilots that he heard the Datta's communication with Rep and understood it. Another possible reason for the Kazakh jet deviating from its assigned altitude, investigators felt, could be pilots' poor proficiency in English, who may have misunderstood the assigned level assigned to Saudi jet as his own. Shah to the rescue, the BJP appeared handicapped by the lethargic and late start at the Delhi Assembly election. Makan's maneuver, Makan's maneuver, and Sonia's slip up. This was no election but a referendum. In Delhi, what we saw last week, that was not so much an election as a referendum on Arvind Kejriwal. It was not an Aam Aadmi party that lost. He did because he had turned the political party he started into a personal appendage and projected himself as a new kind of a political leader who could save India from a cynical and corrupt political culture. This is probably why he won Delhi with himself as a symbol of hope. He won nearly every seat in the assembly. He began to betray this hope almost immediately after. Suddenly, this ordinary little man who liked to dress and behave like Aam Aadmi he claimed to represent started showing signs of an ugly narcissism. Mugshots of him enlarged and painted in dazzling hues appeared on the back of Delhi buses and on hoardings across the city, and it was impossible to turn the radio without hearing him expound on some new idea or scheme. There were these were mostly worthless ideas like his ludicrous and utterly useless odd even traffic plan to reduce vehicular pollution, but he made it sound as if he was doing something wondrous, and the Western media gave him publicity that was truly undeserved. Personally, I saw him as a sly, sneaky, and duplicitous, even in these euphoric Anna Hazare days when he became as a public figure, as a man who was by the side of the one who was fasting to death to end corruption. But at election time, when I traveled into rural parts of Bihar and UP, I realized that millions of ordinary Indians had invested their hopes and faith in him. I will never forget a village in Bihar which was inspired to start its own campaign against corruption that was led by the man they called our Kejriwal. The first time I saw Kejriwal at the close range was on Assi Ghat in Benares when he sat looking gloomy under the banyan tree outside my hotel on some kind of fast or protest. He had come to take on Narendra Modi. This this I saw instantly as delusions of grandeur because here was a man whose only political experience was a few weeks as a chief minister of Delhi and who was already hoping to become prime minister. Warning bells should have rung loudly then, but the people of Delhi continued to invest their trust in him. They forgave him, abandoning them for the first time and gave him two more chances. When he won resoundingly 5 years ago, he promised them everything that they longed for: clean air to breathe, clean water in Yamuna, clean politicians, and clean slate on which to write a new chapter in this city that has nearly always been betrayed by his political leaders. He started off well, schools improved so much that I constantly met people who said that they had taken their children out of private schools because government schools were now so good. I have seen some myself in New Delhi constituency where I vote and can vouch for this. I have also visited a few mohalla clinics and I found them clean and impressive. So, what went so wrong that he was arrested and sent off Tihar jail? That there was not a single protest in his support. Ambition and narcissism are the two words that come to my mind. He forgot about Delhi to try and refashion his image as a national leader. Suddenly, he wanted to win elections in Gujarat, Goa, and everywhere. After he won Punjab, the ambition and narcissism soared to a dangerous levels, and the only people who seemed not to notice this were sycophantic ministers who surrounded him. Ordinary voters noticed. When all these senior ministers ended up in jail, he appointed a sycophant so servile that she ruled in his name, as if she was keeping the seat of the Delhi warm for Ram himself. Meanwhile, Delhi deteriorated and deteriorated. As a citizen of Delhi, who have spent my childhood and nearly all my growing years here, it breaks my heart every time when I see how poisonous the Yamuna's waters have become and how high those mountains of garbage that have replaced landfills. As someone who lives in Delhi village, I cannot begin to describe adequately the filth that I step into every time I come out of my house. Squalid bazaars and filthy streets are everywhere, and out of them rise shiny new samples of private investment like hotels and fine office blocks. These are the things you see in every Indian city, as I am often reminded by readers of this column, but it is only in Delhi that we had a man who portrayed himself a leader so different that he brought with him the promise of an India in which poorest and most humble of our citizens could hope that their voices would also be heard. When the leader built himself a magnificent new residence fitted with all the things that ordinary Indians cannot dream of in a one room tenements that is an average home, all the hope was lost in last week's referendum. If there is one person who has lost completely, it is Kejriwal. What he has proved is that he is just like other politicians and no symbol of hope, a new symbol of political culture and a new dream. Economy, except durable recovery, expect durable recovery in private investment following the rate cuts, tax relief, security, logistics, labor, major hurdles facing 21,000 crore transmission project linking Ladakh to Haryana. The financial viability of the entire project hinges on the 12 gigawatt of battery storage at the Pang Renewable Energy Park, which will enhance the transmission system capacity from 35% to 76%. Importantly, India currently has less than 1 gigawatt of grid connected battery storage, which much of the supply chain dominated by China. Global commitments hold back RBI from scheduling mid-month MPC meetings. A finance minister says IT bill to be introduced in Lok Sabha next week. Meta prepares for layoffs on Monday. Reciprocal tariffs on many nations next week. SEBI bans She-Wolf Asmita Patel from markets, amount impounds 53 crore. Decide by BCCI Baiju settlement in a week. NCLAT. Oil India's net profit drops 23% on lower oil prices. Hamas frees three hostages while Israel began releasing Palestinians. Trump's aid freeze for live streaming programs sparks global mayhem. Aga Khan's funeral service held in Lisbon. China summons Panama ambassador for pulling out of BRI after Trump's threat. Orban, Le Pen hail Trump at far-right's patriots meet in Madrid. Trump's talk of absorbing Canada is a real thing, says PM Trudeau. Let's do a deal, says Zelensky, offers US rare earth for security. Khamenei meets top Hamas leaders. Black Day, PTI leaders arrested during protest. Mother of jailed Egypt activist seeks Britain's help in freeing him, one day of hunger at a time. While dating sites have lost their sheen, meetup platforms are the new convergence grounds, evolving as antidote to loneliness. Dali was fascinated by Indian myths. On a wing and a petition, vultures, nature's greatest scavengers and best waste warriors of the planet, have now more than carrion to feed on plastic. What makes for a symphony of souls? Alternate cinema can thrive only if mainstream films do well. You need to acknowledge where you come from. Junaid Khan and Khushi Kapoor on their film Lavyapa, nepotism and coping with the unrealistic beauty standards of the industry. When cancer care comes closer home, tea tourism in India, a journey through India's tea gardens. Aam Aadmi verdict, BJP for Delhi. Five-fold jump in BJP seats, flip side of a caste survey, Telangana government feels heat on numbers. Firing between army and militants at the LOC. Fire destroys over 2 dozen shops in Kashmir's Sonberg. Hope justice is delivered so we can start grieving 8 years on. Irish backpacker's mother awaits final court ruling. Capital comeback after 27 years. The BJP's vanvas of 27 years has ended. Outside Kejriwal's residence, never imagined he could lose in Delhi. Delhi liberated from decade of Abda, Prime Minister. Region on the moon where Chandrayaan 3 landed is 3.7 billion years old ISRO study. A new study by ISRO scientists has estimated the age of the region where Chandrayaan 3 landed on the moon to be 3.7 billion years, coinciding with the period where primitive microbial life first emerged on Earth. A team of scientists from ISRO's PRL Ahmedabad has for the first time performed morphological and topographic analysis of Chandrayaan 3 landing site. India on August 23, 2023 became the first country to successfully make a soft landing on the moon's south pole. With help of data generated by Pragyan rover that was housed inside the Vikram lander on board Chandrayaan 3, Indian scientists have been churning out new interpretations and insights on the moon's evolution. PRL scientists have deployed high-end imaging techniques like lunar reconnaissance orbiter, wide-angle camera, and terrain camera to gather crater and rock distribution data from the lunar surface near Shiv Shakti. They noted Pragyan rover has unusually encountered several rock fragments of over 1 centimeter at the landing site. The chain of secondary craters and crater ejecta rays were used to infer the potential sourcing of materials. Numerous craters within three distinct types of terrain types were studied: high relief rugged terrain, high relief smooth plains, and low relief smooth plains. For low relief smooth plains, the area that hosts the landing site, the best fit age is about 33.7 GA billion years, done using 25 craters. No speech in SpaceX, as says chairman. ISRO chairman V. Narayan, v. Narayanan said there were no glitches in agency's maiden space docking mission. No glitches right now. It is docked. We are going step by step. We are studying and then we are planning to do a lot of experiments. On January 16, the ISRO successfully performed docking of satellites as a part of space docking experiment. Rokh Sakena Trump in Punjab, songs glorifying donkey route are all the rage. Microsoft executive and IIT Madras alumnus heads India's top research agency, Shivkumar Kalyan Raman. So that's all for today. See you in the next one.